Welcome. You are listening to the Perio Patient Podcast, episode 34. My name is Dr. Ben Young. Let's jump right in. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share with you a little bit about who I am, both as a dentist, but more importantly, as a human being who happens to have wound up professionally being a dentist specializing in periodontics. My purpose within this podcast is to give you something you would not get from someone else. And what might that be? Well, it isn't opinions. We all have personal opinions, and we hear those of others everywhere and all the time. In fact, I'm very reluctant to give you my opinions disconnected from the stated purpose of this podcast because I personally would be annoyed if someone were to promote a topic with a theme like periodontics or dentistry and then go off talking about other unrelated things, personal opinions. On the other hand, and as I have said in earlier podcasts, I'm the kind of person who seeks to break down barriers of communication between people who come from different life experiences and backgrounds and think differently as an obvious given. You can't possibly think what I think, and I think what you think. Again, that's sort of obvious. But my hope is that as I share about my life, with most of it being specifically within my professional education and experiences, that you will be more comfortable with thinking about your own life and health. Well, today, I want to step way back and to talk about a subject that all of us living in the United States share, whether we like it or not. And it actually relates directly to my professional and personal life as well as yours, because it is the environment in which I practice my specific area within the broader circle of healthcare, and how all of us are able to cooperate together for the delivery of healthcare along with everything else within our particular society. That's my link to why I want to talk about some of the founding documents of the United States, because it is within the context of the laws and liberties of this nation in which we live that we have the ability, at least so far, to both provide and obtain health care. And we also have the rights and liberties under this particular, and even from a world perspective, peculiar system of government to address the things we don't like about the system as it relates to our health care as well as all other aspects of our lives. Go to other countries and work within their systems, and you will find healthcare access to be managed often very differently. So, what I would like to do is go back to the founding documents and read from some of them out loud in order that the documents themselves can remind us who we are as a nation. The first document is the Declaration of Independence, signed July 4, 1776. Interestingly, following the war, as life moved on within the former 13 colonies, now newly formed states, this document was largely forgotten and set aside. I'm sure that's because it isn't a legal document. Rather, it is, as its title states, a declaration. Historically, it became important later by the writings and speeches of Abraham Lincoln, who was trying in his time of the 1860s to preserve the Union. Here is what he said about the Declaration of Independence in 1861. And for context, the Civil War began with the 33-hour bombardment of Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861. Now, before I read what Lincoln wrote about the Declaration of Independence, I need to give you a proverb he is citing. It is found in the Old Testament book of Proverbs and is Proverbs 25:11. The King James Version that Lincoln probably read goes like this. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. Apples of gold in pictures of silver. So what is that? Well, if you have a beautiful gold picture of apples with silver around it, you have a very valuable piece of art. It is all valuable. In the context of this proverb, the word fitly spoken, when you say something at the right time, it's like this beautiful object in the center of something that also is beautiful. So the whole thing is beautiful, the gold in the center framed by the silver. All right, here is what Lincoln wrote. Quote, all this, meaning our system of government, all this is not the result of accident. It has a philosophical cause. Without the Constitution and the Union, we could not have attained the result, but even these are not the primary cause of our great prosperity. There is something back of these, entwining itself more closely about the human heart. That something is the principle of liberty to all, the principle that clears the path for all, gives hope to all, and, by consequence, enterprise and industry to all. The expression of that principle in our Declaration of Independence was most happy and fortunate. Without this, as well as with it, we could have declared our independence of Great Britain, but without it, we could not, I think, have secured our free government and consequent prosperity. No oppressed people will fight and endure, as our fathers did, without the promise of something better than a mere change of masters. The assertion of that principle at that time was the word fitly spoken, which has proved an apple of gold to us. The Union and the Constitution are the picture of silver, subsequently framed around it. The picture was made not to conceal or destroy the apple, but to adorn and preserve it. The picture was made for the apple, not the apple for the picture. So let us act that neither picture or apple shall ever be blurred or bruised or broken. That we may so act, we must study and understand the points of danger." Unquote. Then, of course, in 1863, he gave his famous Gettysburg Address. Its opening line is, "47 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal." A score is 20. Fourscore is 80, plus 7 equals 87 years before. 1863 minus 87 equals 1776. So now, permit me to read to you the Declaration of Independence and see why Lincoln says liberty was conceived within this document, and hear it declare it for itself, the proposition that all men are created equal. In Congress, July 4, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless these people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by mock trials from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun, with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye now. Haunted French pancakes? Give me the crepes.